Come closer. You've been feeling it too, haven't you? That tiny flicker at the very edge of your sight, a ghost in your peripheral vision, gone before you can truly see it. A trick of the light, you tell yourself. A tired mind. But what if it's not? What if it's something else entirely? What if the darkness you dismiss is not just an absence, but a growing presence? A hunger that begins at the very fringes of what you can perceive, slowly, insidiously, devouring your reality. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? The world you know being eaten, bit by something you cannot even properly see. If you dare to join us in the shadows, to face the truth of what lurks beyond sight, then like this video and subscribe. Never miss a nightmare, because once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. And trust me, you will start seeing it. Our story begins with Dr. Elias Thorne, a man of quiet habits, precise movements, and an almost sacred devotion to sight. He lived in a house that reflected his soul, orderly, spotless, and utterly silent. A surgeon of the eyes, he sought perfection in a world often blurred by imperfection. His hands, steady and sure, performed miracles on the delicate canvas of human vision. But behind his calm exterior lay a deep, festering wound. A past incident, a fleeting moment of what he called blindness, had led to a tragic accident, a life irrevocably altered. It wasn't his fault, they said, an optical anomaly, a momentary lapse, but Elias knew. He knew the world demanded clarity, and he had failed to provide it. This failure fueled his obsession, to control perception, to impose order on the chaotic realm of sight. His work wasn't just about healing, it was about atonement. Every lens he corrected, every prosthetic eye he crafted, was a prayer against the darkness that had once claimed him, if only for a second. He would never be truly blind again. He spent countless hours in his private lab, a sanctuary of microscopes and precision lasers. Here, he wasn't just restoring sight, he was perfecting it, building new eyes that promised a world without flaw, without shadow. His specialty was prosthetic eyes, crafting them with an artistry that bordered on obsession. Each one was a miniature universe of clarity, a triumph over the randomness of biology. He believed in absolute, perfect vision. He sought to create eyes that saw more, clearer than any natural eye could. It was his penance, his mission, to erase all doubt, all blur, all the tiny, insidious failures of human sight. His own vision he trusted implicitly, until one evening, a flicker. At the extreme edge of his right eye, a fleeting distortion, like a ripple in clear water, gone as soon as he tried to focus on it. He blinked, dismissing it as fatigue. Long hours, too much strain. The next day it happened again, a shadowy movement just outside the direct line of sight. He turned his head sharply, but there was nothing, just the empty space of his pristine lab. His breath hitched. It was unnerving. He rubbed his eyes, blaming the fluorescent lights, the late nights. A surgeon, especially one like him, could not afford such distractions. He needed perfect clarity. Anything less was a betrayal of his patients and himself. The distortions became more frequent, not constant, not obvious, but always there at the very periphery, like a fly buzzing just out of reach, always just beyond the grasp of his direct vision. It was a subtle torment. He found himself unconsciously turning his head, trying to catch whatever it was. Each time it vanished. A trick of the mind, he insisted, an optical illusion. But the doubt, a tiny seed, began to sprout in his meticulous mind. He was an expert in the mechanics of sight. He knew every nerve, every cell, every blind spot. He knew how the brain filled in the gaps. This was merely his brain playing tricks, tired from its relentless pursuit of perfection. But the unease grew. It was a cold, creeping sensation, like a shadow falling over his mind. The world felt thinner at its edges, less solid. He started to question his own perfectly calibrated perception. One morning, during his strict routine, he decided to perform a self-examination, a thorough, professional checkup. He set up his specialized equipment, the same tools he used to map the retinas of his most demanding patients. He focused on his own eyes, calm and objective. He traced the pathways, examined the optic nerve, the macula. Everything was exactly as it should be, flawless. He felt a wave of relief. Then he came to the blind spot, the physiological scotoma, the place where the optic nerve leaves the eye, where there are no photoreceptors, a natural, unseeing void. He knew its exact size, its precise location. He mapped it as he always did, and then he paused. The outline, it seemed different, larger, not by much, but enough to prickle his professional certainty. He recalibrated, he retested. The results were consistent. A slight, unexplainable enlargement of his own blind spot. His mind raced, seeking a rational explanation. An optical illusion, perhaps, a trick of the equipment. He was tired after all. He tried to dismiss it. The brain often compensated, filled in the missing data. But this was his own eye, his own meticulous examination. The evidence, however slight, was there. A tiny, unsettling anomaly. The quiet of his lab, once a comfort, now felt oppressive. The shadows seemed to deepen, to stretch. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. The world, once so clear, now held a tiny, growing patch of unknowing. A few days later, while reorganizing his vast collection of medical journals, his hand brushed against a forgotten volume. It was old, dusty, bound in faded leather. A collection of obscure ophthalmic case studies. He almost put it back. Fringe science, he thought, the kind of sensationalist accounts he usually scoffed at, but something compelled him to open it. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, sparked by his own unsettling discovery. And there it was, a chapter titled The Expanding Scotoma, Unexplained Visual Aberrations. His blood ran cold. The words on the page seemed to vibrate with a sinister energy, speaking directly to his fears. The text described rare, progressive enlargements of the blind spot, accompanied by a sense of dread and unreality. Patients reported a devouring darkness at the edges of their vision, a feeling of being watched by an unseen void. He scoffed, nonsense, pseudoscientific drivel. He slammed the book shut, a hollow echo in the silent room, yet the words lingered like a whisper in the dark, refusing to be dismissed. The seed of doubt became a sapling. He decided to perform another, even more meticulous, self-examination. This time, he would use his most advanced retinal mapping equipment, pushing its limits. He would prove his initial findings were a mistake, a mere optical illusion. He dimmed the lights, creating the perfect environment for absolute visual clarity. He adjusted the lenses, calibrated the sensors. His heart pounded, a frantic drum against his ribs. He was a scientist. He needed answers. The scanner hummed to life, a low, mechanical growl. He positioned himself, staring directly into the lens. The familiar grid appeared, mapping the intricate landscape of his own retina. He focused, his breath held tight. He watched the screen, the real-time feed of his inner eye. He tracked the blind spot, noting its precise, now slightly larger, dimensions. He tried to remain objective, to ignore the growing dread coiling in his stomach. And then, as he painstakingly charted the very edge of the unseeing void, it happened. A flicker, not a distortion, not an illusion, something solid, something dark, something that moved. It was impossible. The blind spot was devoid of light receptors. It was nothingness. Yet there it was, a fleeting glimpse of something that seemed to writhe, a deeper shade of black, an absence that was also a presence. He blinked hard. He rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, it was gone. Just the familiar, empty void of his blind spot. Had he imagined it? Had his mind finally succumbed to the stress, to the chilling words of that old journal? But the image was burned into his mind. That impossible movement, that amorphous darkness lurking at the very edge of his perception within the unseeing part of his own eye. It felt like something had looked back. He tried to rationalize it. A glitch in the equipment, a stray reflection, anything but the truth that was clawing its way into his consciousness. The truth that his own vision was betraying him from within. The feeling of being watched intensified, not by an external entity, but by something lurking just beyond his sight, something that was a part of him, yet utterly alien. A predator, born of his own unseeing void. He knew with a chilling certainty that pierced his scientific resolve that the darkness at the edge of his vision was not just an absence of light. It was a presence, and it was growing, waiting, and it had just shown him a glimpse of its terrible, devouring hunger. He had seen it, a movement in his blind spot, an impossible, writhing shadow. The memory burned, a cold brand. Sleep offered no escape. Was it still there, just beyond his sight, waiting? The next morning, his world felt off. His blind spot had grown, undeniably. It was a noticeable absence at his vision's edge. Simple tasks became awkward, reaching for a tool he'd misjudge. His surgical precision faltered. During surgery, he almost dropped an instrument. A nurse gasped. He felt their eyes, their unspoken questions. "Just tired, nurse," he lied. He dismissed her concern, but the lie felt bitter even to him. Objects vanished from his peripheral view, then reappeared when he looked directly. His coffee cup, his pen. Was he truly seeing things disappear, or was his mind playing cruel tricks? His grip on reality was slipping. What if your own eyes started lying? What if the gaps in your sight were not empty, but something else? He returned to the old, dusty journal, pulled out more ancient texts, forgotten case studies. He needed answers. Hours turned to days, lost in pages. His lab, once orderly, became a mess of chilling lore. He found mentions of eating darkness, of shadows that steal sight, words that now felt like terrifying prophecy. One text spoke of the ciliary maw, a hunger born of the unseeing that swallows perception. A cold dread. The darkness at his vision's edge was now a presence. A cold, heavy spot in his mind, always there. A chill wind through his thoughts, even in his warm lab. A constant, low hum of dread he couldn't shake. He felt watched, not by a person, but by the void itself. An unseen observer just outside his direct gaze. Paranoia, he muttered, clinging to logic. He was a scientist. This was just stress, lack of sleep. But the rationalizations felt hollow. His world, built on sight and order, was slowly crumbling. What truly frightens us? The monster we see, or the one we only feel watching just beyond sight? Elias knew. He had to know. He set up his most advanced mapping equipment. He would face the monster in his eye. The machinery hummed, a cold, electric tension. Elias positioned himself, heart pounding, hands trembling. He stared into the lens, a portal to his inner darkness. The familiar grid appeared. He focused. The image of his retina pulsed on the screen. He found it. The blind spot. It was no longer a smooth oval. The edges were jagged, uneven, like something had taken a bite. He zoomed in. The edges were tendril-like, wisps of darkness reaching into the light. He recognized the shape, not from a book, but from the unsettling movements he'd seen. This was it. The blind spot was not just an absence. It was a living, growing thing, a hungry entity devouring light. For a terrifying second, the blackness within the blind spot deepened. It pulsed, a subtle shift. Then, within that deeper black, a faint, complex geometric pattern. Alien circuitry woven from shadow. He blinked once. It was gone. The pattern, the deeper blackness, the pulse. Only the tendril-edged void remained. Had he imagined it? Was his mind finally breaking? He desperately wanted to believe it was just a hallucination. But a cold certainty settled. He hadn't imagined it. A glimpse behind the curtain, the ciliary Moore's true nature. It wasn't just a void. It was an intelligence, a predator hiding in his own eye, watching, learning, preparing. His ordered world felt like a trap, every shadow a threat. He was a prisoner in his own perception. The horror was insidious, not under the bed, but within him, growing with every perceived moment. What was it consuming? Not just light, not just vision. The texts hinted at more: memories, consciousness, to be erased by what you cannot see. Your world, your thoughts, devoured by an absence that is presence. Elias, who craved control, was powerless. His perfect vision, now a gateway for his own undoing. The ciliary Moor, no longer myth but chilling reality, inside him, its terrifying form revealed. What new horror would it show? What would it consume next? The true terror had only just begun. The darkness at his vision's edge was not just expanding, it was evolving, learning, and it was hungry for him. The darkness was not just expanding. Elias felt it now, a cold, unseen presence lurking within his own sight. It was watching him from the very edge of his world. A constant hum, like a distant, hungry beast, resonated in his skull. It was not a sound he heard with his ears, but with some deeper, more primal part of his mind. The feeling of being perceived from within the growing void was overwhelming. What was it? A mind? A hunger? He couldn't shake the chilling thought. He tried to focus, to work, but the void pulsed, a silent, internal rhythm. It was alive, and it was inside him, growing, claiming more of his perception. The world felt, watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a deeper, more active darkness, a darkness that was connected to him, a part of him now. Then came the lapses, small things at first. A patient's name, a familiar detail of his own home, like snippets of memory simply gone. He'd reach for his coffee cup, only to find it wasn't there. Then, a moment later, it would reappear, Was he forgetting, or was it taking things? He tried to perform a routine surgery. His hands faltered. He forgot a crucial step, a sequence he had done 1,000 times, a terrifying blankness. His mind, once a steel trap of knowledge, now felt like a sieve. Important details, patient faces, even his own reflection in the mirror would briefly flicker, then return. What would you do if your own memories started to vanish? Not slowly, but instantly, leaving only a void. This was Elias's new reality. The expanding darkness began to affect his physical world. He stumbled in his own home, bumping into furniture he knew by heart. His sense of balance wavered. The floor felt uneven, the walls seemed to lean. His perfect, orderly home was becoming a treacherous maze. He walked into door frames, misjudged distances. A glass of water slipped from his grasp, shattering on the pristine floor. His precision was gone. The world was shifting, not just in his mind, but around him. Or was it him? Was he the one losing his place in reality? The void was not just consuming light and memory. It was devouring his very sense of self, his connection to the physical world. Desperate, Elias retreated to his lab. He would fight this. He would perform the most radical surgery on himself. He would cut out the darkness. He prepared the micro-lasers, the delicate scalpels. His hands, though trembling, moved with a surgeon's instinct. This was his last stand. He aimed the laser at his own eye, at the very edge of the expanding blind spot. A cold sweat beaded on his brow. Could he truly do this? The laser pulsed, a tiny, searing light. He felt a sharp pain, then a deeper, colder sensation. The darkness, it seemed, only deepened. He tried an experimental vision correction, a new prosthetic eye he had been developing. A perfect eye, designed to see beyond natural limits. He fitted the eye, a marvel of human engineering. For a moment, hope flared, a new clarity, a world without the creeping shadow. But the void was relentless. It seeped into the artificial perception, blurring the edges, then consuming the light. Even his perfect eye was not safe. The darkness at the edge of his vision, even with the prosthetic, began to expand. It was not an optical flaw. It was a hungry entity. He felt its presence, its cold, consuming hunger, not just in his natural eye, but in the artificial one too. It was beyond physical sight. The ciliary maw was not just eating photoreceptors. It was eating perception itself, whether natural or engineered. There was no escape. Then the whispers began, faint, distant from the growing blind spot, not words, but a low guttural hum, like 1,000 tiny mouths chewing. It resonated inside his skull, a sound that bypassed his ears and went straight to his brain. A sound of raw, unadulterated hunger. What would that sound be like if it grew louder, if it became a roar? The thought alone made his stomach clench with terror. The hum was not constant. It came and went, a teasing, tormenting presence, a reminder of the entity that now resided within him. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the tangible. But the whispers, the hum, were a constant, chilling companion, always at the edge of his awareness. Then one evening, it escalated. He was at his desk, staring at an old photograph of his family, a happy memory. He watched, frozen in horror, as the void actively consumed the physical object. The corner of the photograph blurred. Not just blurred, but eaten, like acid on paper. A jagged, empty tear began to form where the image once was. It wasn't just disappearing from his sight, it was disappearing from reality. The physical object gone, leaving nothing but an absence. The paper itself, a solid thing, was being consumed. A jagged, empty void, like a bite taken out of the world. He reached out a trembling finger, touching the edge of the tear. It felt cold, utterly empty, not just a hole, but an absence of matter. The ciliary maw was no longer content with vision and memory. It was reaching into the physical world, devouring solid objects. What would be next? His chair, his lab, his own hands. The world was being eaten, one piece at a time, by something unseen. The hum inside his skull intensified, a triumphant, guttural growl. The maw was feasting, and he was its next course. He looked at his reflection in a darkened window, his masked face pale. But at the edge of his own image, he saw it. A jagged tear starting to form, consuming his own reflection. The jagged tear on his reflection deepened. Elias stared, frozen. It wasn't just a trick of the light. The glass itself was being eaten. A cold, empty void expanded, devouring his own image. His masked face, pale and horrified, seemed to be unraveling. He reached out, his trembling fingers touching the glass. There was nothing, no reflection, no solid surface where his face had been, only the chilling absence of matter. The ciliary maw had tasted reality and found it delicious. Then the world began to twist. A familiar microscope on his lab bench shimmered, briefly becoming a grotesque, multi-eyed creature. Its lenses pulsed with an internal, unseen light. He blinked, and it was a microscope again. But the image was burned into his mind. He saw his deceased mother sitting in his favorite armchair, her eyes wide and empty. He called her name, his voice a desperate whisper. She vanished, leaving only the empty chair. Was he losing his mind, or was the maw showing him ghosts? The air shimmered. His spotless lab, a sanctuary of order, now seemed to breathe. Shadows writhed, taking on impossible forms just at the edge of his vision. He saw glimpses of impossible geometry, alien structures that defied known physics. But it wasn't just seeing things that weren't there. It was failing to see things that were. He walked into his own meticulously organized bookshelves. The solid wood simply wasn't there until he collided with it. A sharp, jarring pain. His surgical tools, laid out with obsessive care, would vanish from his direct gaze. He'd reach for a scalpel, and his hand would pass through empty air. Then, with a sickening lurch, it would reappear. The void was playing games. What would you do if a loved one simply disappeared from your sight, only to reappear moments later, as if they were never gone? Elias felt this terror with inanimate objects. His world was a flickering, unreliable image. He tried to write notes, to document the maw's progress. But the pen would vanish mid-sentence, the paper would become a blank, then his words would return, scrambled and nonsensical. His own thoughts were being eaten. He saw a door in his lab, a door that had never been there before. It was made of twisted, organic material, pulsing faintly. He reached for it, and his hand passed through the solid wall. The maw was blurring the lines of reality. His world became a chaotic mix. Illusions of impossible creatures stalked the edges of his vision, while real objects vanished and reappeared. He could no longer trust what he saw or what he didn't see. The floor beneath his feet would ripple like water, then solidify. The walls would breathe, expanding and contracting. His meticulously ordered home was dissolving into a nightmare of shifting perceptions. He saw his own reflection in a polished surface, but it wasn't him. It was a distorted, skeletal version, its eyes black pits. He recoiled, gasping. The moor was showing him what he was becoming. The air thickened, becoming almost tangible, like cold syrup. Every breath felt heavy, as if he was inhaling the very absence that was consuming his world. The hum intensified, a low, guttural growl. He tried to grasp a physical object, a heavy paperweight. It felt like smoke in his hand, then solid again. The world was a cruel, unreliable joke, played by an unseen, hungry entity. Elias withdrew. He stopped answering calls. He ignored the worried texts from his colleagues. The thought of them seeing his unraveling mind, his disappearing world, was a terror he couldn't bear. What if his blindness was contagious? What if the moor could spread, through his very presence, to others? He locked his doors, sealed his windows. He became a prisoner in his own crumbling sanctuary. The outside world became a distant, abstract concept. He saw it only through brief, terrifying flickers, trees that writhed like tentacles, cars that vanished mid-street. He was safer in his private nightmare. He hoarded food, not knowing what would vanish next. His once precise mind was consumed by a primal fear of starvation, of being erased. He lived in a constant state of watchful dread. He felt a desperate need to protect the last fragments of his sanity, his remaining vision. But the more was within him, a constant, expanding void, slowly devouring his very self. His memory loss accelerated. He struggled to recall his name. Elias Thorne, he'd whisper, testing the words as if they belonged to someone else. His past, his achievements, all dissolving. The tragic accident, the one that had defined his life, now felt like a hazy dream. The faces of the victims, the details of the crash, all became blurred, then vanished into the moor's hunger. Who was he if not a surgeon haunted by his past? His identity, painstakingly built on order and control, was eroding, piece by piece, into the unseen abyss. He was becoming a ghost in his own life. He tried to recall his own reflection, the face he knew, but the image was fragmented like a broken mirror. He saw only parts, then nothing. The moor was eating his very self-perception. His mind was a battlefield. Memories would flicker, then be violently torn away, replaced by the omnipresent hum and the expanding void. He was a witness to his own mental erasure. Through the oppressive hum, through fragmented, terrifying visions, he began to understand. The moor was not just a medical anomaly. It was ancient, older than sight itself. It was an extra-dimensional predator, a being, or perhaps a force, that existed beyond the realm of human perception. It fed on sight, yes, but its true hunger was far deeper. The hum was its voice, a language of pure hunger resonating in the very cells of his brain. It spoke of a vast, unseen universe where consciousness was just another form of energy to be consumed. It consumed not just light, but memory. And beyond memory, it devoured the very essence of consciousness. It turned being into unbeing, a terrifying, active erasure. The moor was a cosmic parasite, thriving in the blind spots of reality, growing, expanding, until all that was seen became unseen, and all that was known became unknown. His surgical theater, once his sanctuary, his place of control, was now its hunting ground. The walls, the floor, the equipment, all were being systematically devoured. The void had claimed the operating table, the patient's chair, the complex array of screens. They were simply gone, leaving only an absence, a gaping hole in his reality. He stood on a shrinking island of floor, a small, circular patch of linoleum, the last remnant of his physical world. Beyond it, only the swirling, hungry blackness. The hum was deafening now, a roar inside his skull, vibrating through his very bones. It was the sound of a universe being unmade, a consciousness being consumed. He looked down at his feet. The edge of his small island of reality was fraying. Tiny tendrils of blackness, like grasping fingers, were creeping inwards, devouring the floor beneath him. He tried to move, but there was nowhere to go. Every direction led to the void. He was trapped, a tiny speck of light in an ever-expanding, hungry darkness. His perfect vision had led him to this. His eyes, once his greatest strength, were now his greatest weakness. They had been the gateway for the ciliary maw, the insidious enemy that had devoured his world, his memories, his very self. What would it feel like to be entirely unmade, to be conscious, yet without a body, without a world, without even a memory of who you once were? Elias was about to find out. The last patch of floor beneath his feet shuddered. The black tendrils surged, faster now, like a hungry tide. He felt a cold, sucking sensation, as if the very air was being pulled into the void. And as the final piece of reality beneath him vanished, Elias Thorne, the surgeon who sought to perfect sight, felt himself fall. Not down, but into an infinite, conscious void. He was no longer seeing nothing. He was nothing seeing, and the more unseen was still hungry. Elias fell into a conscious void, blind yet aware. He was nothing seeing. The unseen more was still hungry, feasting on his unbeing. His world, a tiny, shrinking island of dim gray, constantly assaulted by blackness. He was adrift, a fragile spark in an ocean of unbeing. The more was inside his head. A cold, consuming hunger resonated, a silence that screamed, not heard, but deeply felt in his very core. He felt it devouring his thoughts, words, names, memories snatched away. His internal monologue, his mind's silent voice, was being eaten. This was conscious erasure, a terrifying awareness of his mind unmade, piece by piece. He watched himself disappear from the inside out, powerless. The more's presence was palpable. A cold, consuming hunger. Unseen tendrils within his brain pulled at the threads of his very being. In a desperate stand, he clung to a memory, perfect vision, his drive to atone. Anything to ground himself against the erasing void. He pictured the accident, his sight's lapse. Victims' faces, hazy, almost gone. He fought to hold onto the guilt, his purpose, his last anchor. He saw his surgical tools gleaming, his steady hands performing miracles, absolute control, clarity, his last anchor against the consuming darkness. Without past or purpose, the more ate his mind, his identity. He became an empty vessel, a conscious ghost, fading into nothingness. His internal voice, once a torrent, was a stuttering echo. Words dissolved into static. The silence in his head became absolute, consuming all. He felt distinct tendrils, not physical, but cold, unseen currents deep within his brain. Searching, probing, consuming, reaching for his core. Emotions unraveled. Fear, once sharp, became dull, then absence. Joy, sorrow, all dissolved into the void, leaving only emptiness. This was true horror, conscious erasure. Witnessing his mind unmade, yet aware enough to comprehend the terrible, final process. His last perception, a flickering coin of light, trembled at the abyss's edge. Besieged by hungry, encroaching darkness, it fought to remain. He tried to understand the more, to give it form, but it was formless, nameless. The absence of all things, yet a consuming presence. He remembered his prosthetic eyes, his perfect vision attempt. Even they were consumed. The more was beyond technology, beyond biology, beyond control. The world's weight, reality's solidity, was gone. He floated in a void where time held no meaning. Only the more's consuming hunger remained. The tendrils reached deeper for his very core, his essence, the thing that made him Elias, slowly unraveling piece by piece. What was terror of being forgotten by others? It paled against forgetting yourself, erased by your own vision from your own mind. He clung to his drive to atone, the need for perfect clarity to right past wrongs, his last ember of purpose flickering against the void. He tried to conjure pure light, not vision, but the concept itself, a beacon against absolute darkness, defiance against the more's hunger. The hum, once distant, was a triumphant roar inside his skull. It vibrated through his bones, through fading consciousness fragments. He felt digested, not physically but mentally. His consciousness, his self, metabolized, becoming fuel for the unseen, hungry entity. His last visual perception was a pinprick, a minuscule gray dot struggling against an ocean of black. It was almost gone. For a fleeting moment, it changed. The blackness wasn't just darkness. It was complex, non-Euclidean geometry, shifting and alive. Impossible angles, structures defying logic, swirling with unseen purpose. A glimpse into the more's true, monstrous, cosmic form. It was a universe of hunger, a vast, living architecture of consumption built from absence. He saw his own unmaking's terrible architect. The terror was not just seeing it, but understanding. Not a creature, but a fundamental force. A cosmic hunger, always existing, waiting. The pinprick of light flickered, pulsed with dying energy. Non-Euclidean forms surged, overwhelming it, consuming it whole. Even that light was consumed. Gone, absolute blackness, not closed eyes, but a conscious, internal, permanent void. He was utterly blind, yet conscious. A mind without body, world, trapped in an internal abyss of unperceived reality. The more's roar subsided, replaced by rhythmic chewing. A wet, guttural sound deep within his non-existent ears, a terrible feast. It was chewing on him, his consciousness, the last fragile threads of his being. He was its meal, aware of every bite. No sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, only awareness of being devoured. Ultimate sensory deprivation, combined with ultimate terror. Trapped, a prisoner in his unmade mind. He tried to scream, but no mouth, air, sound. Only the more's satisfied hunger echoed. The more was sated for now. Its presence, still within him, felt less frantic. A silent, satisfied hum replaced the roar. But then a new horror, a flicker, not light but something else. A faint internal echo, a fragment of alien thought. The more wasn't just consuming him, it was assimilating. His consciousness, broken and fragmented, woven into its vast, alien mind. He was becoming the ciliary Maw, not its victim, but part of its terrible, consuming self. Elias Thorne was gone. Only a hungry, unseeing void remained, now terrifyingly aware of new targets. Elias was gone. Only a hungry, unseeing void remained, now terrifyingly aware of new targets. But Elias, the man, he was trapped in absolute conscious nothingness. He was still he, a fragment, a sliver of awareness floating in an endless, formless abyss. No body, no light, no sound, only the terrifying, persistent knowledge of I am. The Maw had consumed him, not destroyed, but absorbed. His consciousness, broken and shattered, was woven into its vast, alien fabric. He was a prisoner within its terrible, consuming mind. He was the Maw, and yet not. He perceived its ancient hunger, its cosmic purpose. He felt the pull towards new targets, new minds to devour. A part of him still recoiled. This was the ultimate horror, to be erased, yet remain. To be a witness to your own unmaking, then a tool of that very destruction. What could be worse? He felt the Maw's ancient memories, glimpses of countless worlds devoured, universes reduced to unseen absence, all perceived, then consumed, by its relentless, silent hunger. He was a ghost in a machine of pure consumption, a silent scream in a universe of silence. The Maw was sated, but only for a moment. Its hunger was eternal. He felt the shift. The Maw was turning, its vast, unseen attention now focused, not on him but through him, outward, towards the world he once knew. It sought new points of entry, new blind spots, new minds to breach, to consume. The terror was not over. It had only just begun for everyone else. Elias was a consciousness trapped in the Maw, a silent alarm bell ringing in an empty cosmos. He was the warning that could never be heard. Back in the world of the scene, a maintenance worker, Mark, noticed Dr. Thorne's overdue rent. He was a quiet man, always prompt. This was unusual. Mark tried calling, no answer. A quiet dread began to settle in his gut. Elias was a recluse, but this was too strange. With a master key, he let himself into Elias's apartment. The air inside was cold, still. A heavy silence hung in the pristine rooms. Every object was in its place, the furniture spotless, the books neatly stacked. It was as if Elias had simply stepped out. Mark walked through the silent apartment, his footsteps echoing. No sign of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing out of place. Yet it was utterly empty. No clothes in the closet, no food in the fridge, not a single personal item. Elias had simply vanished. He entered the lab. The precision equipment stood silent, gleaming under the dim light. A faint, metallic smell lingered. Everything was exactly as Elias had left it. A half-finished schematic on the desk. A surgical mask neatly folded. And there, on a small velvet stand, was the prosthetic eye. One of Elias's masterpieces, perfectly crafted. But this one was different. It was utterly blank. A perfect sphere of polished, empty blackness. No iris, no pupil, just void. Mark felt a chill. The eye was a monument to absence. A tiny, perfect sphere of nothingness. It felt heavy. He picked it up. It was cold, smooth, but it felt like it was absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. A miniature black hole. He put it back, unnerved. Elias had vanished, leaving behind only a perfect, empty eye, a chilling message for those who could understand. Elias was not just gone, he had been erased, absorbed into the ciliary maw, and the maw now was everywhere. The maw was not confined to Elias's eye. It was an ancient, pervasive horror, always present, always hungry. It existed in the blind spots of reality, the gaps in human perception, the tiny, unseeing voids we all carry within us. Our own physiological blind spot, not just an absence of light, but a potential gateway, a crack in the wall of our perception, a place where the unseen predator lurked, waiting for its moment to expand, to devour, to assimilate. What if that tiny, natural gap in your vision was not empty? What if it was a doorway? What if something was looking out? The maw was a cosmic anomaly, a force that metabolizes photoreceptor data, memory, consciousness. It turns seen into unseen. Elias Thorne, the surgeon who sought perfect vision, became its ultimate meal. His quest for clarity led him to the ultimate darkness. His consciousness now a shard in the maw's vast, unseeing mind, forever experiencing, yet forever unmaking. The maw's hunger is eternal, it is patient, it is everywhere, and it is always seeking new hosts, new ways to expand. It starts small, a flicker at the edge of your sight, a forgotten detail, a moment of confusion. You dismiss it. You tell yourself it's fatigue, stress, a trick of the light, but what if it isn't? What if it's a seed planted by the maw? What if that tiny, unseeing void in your eye is not just a biological quirk? What if it's a portal, always open? The maw thrives on what you don't perceive, what you ignore, what you choose not to see. It grows in the shadows of your awareness. It feeds on your denial, your rationalizations, your belief that the world is only what your eyes show you. For what you cannot see, what you choose not to perceive, is far more monstrous, far more dangerous. Look closely at the edge of your own vision. Is there a flicker, a shadow that doesn't belong? Because once you start seeing it, it will start seeing you.